Hey everyone, and welcome to our first interview with chord47. I'm joined by Ariel Sol, composer, creator, harpist, and dare I say, iconoclast. Um, I really just want to get like a glimpse into the life of Ari today. So I sort of just want to get like your past, present, and future. But to start, I want to ask you what that word means to you.
Iconoclast.
Yeah,
Oh,
because you have
starting
a
off with a
piece
bang.
named this, right?
Yes, yeah, I do have
Yeah.
a piece called Iconoclast, and actually a lot of thought went into that title. And it's Iconoclast spelled with a lot of like alternate characters and kinds of just um, things that are not the normal text, which is just kind of a stylistic thing borrowed from genres that are like closer to hip hop. But in terms of the actual name, like I mean, the straight up definition of iconoclast, right, is kind of like something that is counter to the system, or like that is intentionally a little bit damaging to a larger structure, to the status quo. It usually refers to one person. And I think like specifically it has like a religious connotation too, that like, somebody that defies religion, or somebody that is like actively counter to a larger religious structure. And I wasn't so much about the religion of it, although that did play a factor because I know harp as an instrument has a lot of religious iconography. So it was more a play on words in that sense. I'm not trying to rail against anyone's religion, of course.
For
Um,
sure. Yeah.
but but it was a piece for, like a metal set. So drum set, electric bass, electric guitar, and harp, an amplified harp running through distortion, basically doing what they do to the guitars. Um, and I think the name just came out of the fact that, like, from where I was at the time, this was a very scary thing to do, and I felt like I was breaking a lot of rules doing
Mhm.
it. Um, and that's sort of how I landed on that name. So very long-winded, but it's all of these things. It's the context, it's the sound, it's the genres.
Right, right. It's sort of funny because you know, I recently only learned about that word maybe like a few weeks ago, or maybe I'd read it before but like wasn't interested in it.
Hmm.
But I've recently been like writing a lot about John Cage, and like in a lot of those essays they refer to him as an iconoclast, and I'm like, what does this mean? And just like the idea of breaking down these like, I guess, traditional structures and like paradigms so
Hmm.
that you can be more free with your expression is something that's like super interesting to me. And what interests me a lot about your work. So I thought it
Yeah,
was
for
really nice.
context,
Yeah.
also, the first performance of that piece was in a classical concert hall. And it sounded like kind of awful because those places are not built for drum set. They're not built for distorted guitar.
Mm.
So it really was like a giant experiment and so much fun, but at the same time, like, okay, like there are things to consider when breaking outside of the box, right?
Yeah,
All
I
right,
get
keep going.
cool. Yeah. So let's start off with like your background.
Hmm.
So I know that you went to the Jacobs School of Music, right?
Hmm.
And you did a double bachelor's, I think, a double degree.
Yeah, I did. Well, it's so funny. The degrees I did whatever I want, but the name of what I wanted changed like six times over the course of my degrees. But what I ended with was a major in harp performance, a major in composition, and then like a smattering of minors and certificates and things.
Yeah, I was reading your bio, and these like concentrations are so cool. Like you've got electronic music, folklore and ethnomusicology, and even mathematics.
Yeah, I started as a math major, and then it's not that I don't like math, it's that I just, when music was the other option, I
Mhm.
chose that over Calc 4 at 8 a.m. So it
Good
was
decision.
really as simple as that.
I totally understand. Do you think that mathematics plays a role in your approach to composition at all?
That's such a loaded question. And I want to break down why that's a loaded question because a
Mhm.
lot of like there's a branch or like a school of thought with contemporary music, especially coming out of like atonal stuff, serialism, and all of the like the
Right.
kind of more mathematically based compositional styles that are directly sonifying either data or sonifying like here's some numbers and we're going to make number music. And like I do not like that stuff. I mean, I respect it and I appreciate it and I do not make it.
Mhm.
Um, and it was very good. I think it was a good thing to happen to music, if you can say that. But also like, we're doing other things. I want music for an audience. Um, but that's not to say that there's no math involved. I think it's more of a kind of metaphorical um parallel in the sense
Mhm.
that like the things I really like about math are kind of the abstractness of the ideas and the way you can create a structure or like you can conceive of something that is like maybe true or like think about numbers or concepts or ideas in a certain way. And there's a certain internal structure and logic to it. And I think those concepts translate really well into musical spaces or into like
Mhm.
songwriting, into things where you're like, okay, for this one, I think the concept behind it is that we're going to keep like these things the same and these things different. And the sort of way of thinking about it is really similar, but I don't really have anything that I would say is as concrete as being like, here is like here's like 12 numbers and here's 12
Right.
pitches.
Yeah, yeah. Like your music is so far from serialism, you know?
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, at the same time, with anything that's tech, it's like, okay, we do have to do a little bit of math to figure out how like this data will map onto this parameter or something, but that's a whole other conversation and that's very
mm,
technical and not conceptual.
totally. Yeah. Although I do want to get into that at some point.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because so it's funny. I found out about you from the Ruth Wickersham Papalia Scholarship, and like I
Gang.
was like, "Who's this dude?" You know, and like I went on Instagram and I was like, "Oh my god, another harpist that's like into electronic
Oh,
music."
I did the
Like,
same with you. So
yeah, that was super cool. I was like, "Wait, he codes in Max MSP and like what the heck? Like that's so niche." And on, do you know any other harpists that have worked in that?
um I I am not sure I know harpists that create in it. I know harpists that play stuff that uses it, like by other
Okay.
people, or like I know harpists that use like guitar pedals and like analog electronics, but I think specific to Max, there's like maybe one that might, but not it doesn't really come across my radar all that much. So if you do,
Okay.
hit me up because I want to know.
Yeah, yeah. I think I'm not entirely sure, but I think Vincent Pierce has
Hmm.
dabbled a little bit in
That's
there.
the one person that I was thinking
Okay,
of,
okay. Yeah, yeah. That's so funny. We should all like Zoom together and have like a Max
right?
jam. So I guess that leads me to my next question. Like you've got harp, you've got composition, you've got technology. I'm wondering like when each started or if they were like all sort of like they all started at the same time and like just came to fruition at different times or like tell me a little bit about that.
It's so funny too because I feel like it's all one journey of creation, and at certain points I do enough of a specific action to qualify for a label, which is like that's just the way we think about things, which is totally fair. But so my journey basically looks like this. I started on harp, like a little itty bitty harpsicle when I was 8, I want to say. And
And that was your
that's
first instrument.
that was my first instrument. Yeah, harp is my one and only other than piano that I had to learn for school, and I am so bad at it. But I started on a little harpsichole when I was like 8, and you're just learning your technique in your little harp Olympics
Oh my gosh.
as a harp Olympics
Of
kid.
course.
Um, and pretty early on, I would make up like little tunes or like I would play something and I know that I would rather it ended this way instead of the way that was written or something. And like so I would just kind of do that and like I never wrote any of that down. I never did anything. So in some sense, you can't really put the label of like composing on that. But in another sense, it's like the generation of ideas was there, like beyond just the tactile sense of playing. So
Mhm.
that sort of developed, I think, when I started committing ideas to paper and like considering the possibility that things that came from my head could be done by other people and not just me. That was like late into middle school. So I want to say eighth grade, which would be maybe like 14, 13, 14.
Mhm.
And then I really was just writing a lot of stuff self-taught. Well, I shouldn't say self-taught because, there's so many mentors and like musical figures that are so inspirational and like helpful, but like I didn't have a professor. I didn't have like a one-on-one composition teacher until I got to college. So in high school, I was just kind of doing my own thing, continuing to learn harp. Um, and then in college, when I got to Indiana University for my bachelor's, that first of all, there's like a whole, we can get into this another time, but there's like a whole like wild goose chase about how I even ended up being a harp major because as I said, like I applied as a math
Mhm.
major and a composition major. And I was
Right.
like, I'm ready to put down performing, which it's,
Wow.
it just keeps coming back.
That's
Um,
so interesting. I mean, I'm totally cool with going down that rabbit hole, if you are.
mm,
Um,
mhm,
yeah, like so you started on harp and then you were sort of just jamming on your own, making your own tunes and whatnot, and then eventually you
mhm.
got it to the page, right? Uh,
Yeah.
did you write solely for harp or were you writing for other instruments too?
Oh yeah. Well, my musical community as I was going through school was like they put me in string orchestra, so I knew a lot of string players and my friends were all string people, so I'd write stuff for our little string groups. At some point in high school, I had stuff that our like school orchestra played and like performed, which was really such a wonderful opportunity, I think. And like I'm really grateful for like my teachers there being so encouraging. Um of that. And
Yeah.
so I think that's kind of the point where I would consider myself like where I started to think of myself as a composer is when I handed off parts to another person and say like you play this now and like not me.
Right.
And it's another tangent is like it's so interesting how that works because now that I'm back kind of writing a bunch of stuff for myself, there's questions of like, oh my God, am I even a real composer? Because I'm only doing like harp stuff right now. But like, that's a whole
Mhm.
other conversation and it's all just labels.
Right, right. Wow, that's so fascinating because, I just started my master's in composition, and like
hmm
my experience before this has been like purely solo harp, and like
hmm
anything that I had written was like for the harp, by a harpist, and then now I'm thrown into this entirely different world where they're like, okay, now like write for like a brass ensemble, and I'm like,
hmm
okay, just like sort of figuring it out. So
Yeah.
that's cool. You like had that musical community to collaborate with, like as you were growing up. That's really
Y-
helpful.
Yeah, and those kinds of things are really huge for me, like community and like one of the kind of philosophies that I've leaned into over the course of a composition degree is that like, people are making music, you're making whatever sounds, but it really like what the process is about is communication. And
Mhm.
that like, writing down sheet music and giving someone parts is a form of communication and it's about making a reality that doesn't exist yet, which is so difficult. If you really reduce it to that there is something that doesn't exist, you have a vision and then you make it exist. That sounds so scary. But the component parts are like, I am talking to a human being. I am telling them this note should be shorter. Like, and so um, a lot of the stuff I do now and a lot of the stuff that I've been experimenting with is like ways that are kind of outside the traditional I don't want to even say hierarchical, but there's one composer and they give their vision, like their yes, this is the music to everyone.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but that there are so many processes by which we can create together or by which the
Mhm.
end product can feel claimed by so many people that are involved.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think we've been going for too long with that top-down paradigm of this like composer just like almost like as a dictator, right? Just
Hmm.
coming in and just telling you everything that needs to happen and not really listening to the other performers or taking any input from them. So yeah, I
Yeah.
really appreciate composers like yourself that uh, view other performers as equals and make it a more collaborative effort.
Yeah, and it's like that kind of approach is so classical too. Like if
Mhm.
you look at the way bands write music, like it's probably someone's song, but they're being influenced by what the bandmates are playing. Or like if you take it into a studio, you have a producer that has pre-laid the tracks, and then,
Mhm.
someone wrote the song, someone else made the beat, someone else did whatever. And at the end of the day, it's like we're all trying to make the best music for ourselves, for each other, and for listeners.
Yeah.
And there's like so much to explore.
So when did technology come into the picture? Like when did you start coding? When did
Right.
Arduino start? Like
Well, Arduino started last week because I
okay.
promised that I would take a video of a piece that did not exist by the end of the week. And this is like pretty classic composer behavior. But yeah, one of my friends who dearly, dearly helped with this, who like was like, here's the code like for this light sensor, like this is the stuff you need to tweak. Like I have not even
Hmm.
begun to learn whatever version of like C sharp or whatever Arduino is using, but like the Arduino stuff is funny because I was just like, hey, or I was talking to my friend and I'm like, hey, can you hop on a call with me and explain like he had a version that was kind of close to what I wanted to do, or like the
Hmm.
mechanical aspects of like how it was measuring data was the data that I wanted to measure.
Yeah.
And I was like, can you just walk me through this and or like give me a file to try to run? Because I have this thing that I said I would do and I need to give it to someone in a week. And at that
Please
point,
save me.
I had no parts. I did not know anything about circuitry. I did not have an Arduino. I did not have like a breadboard. So he was like, "Listen, you need a MIDI class compliant like computer chip. You need like these pieces of things, and like you don't have time to use a soldering iron." So get he we just sat for like 2 hours in a Zoom call, and I was like, "If I get this, like, is this Amazon Primeable?" Like it was kind of chaos. So that's like a whole aside of like, oh my God, the Arduino stuff has just started. But it's so fun. Like
Yeah.
there's there's an insane amount of flexibility when it comes to like being able to control both the software and hardware components, that I'm excited about. But I will back up for a little bit
Yeah.
and talk about where it started.
Right, right.
So this is definitely a college thing, because I did a minor in electronic music. And when I was at IU, I was kind of just trying to absorb as much information as possible. And again, like I'm a hater. I love everything, but I'm also a hater. And so there's plenty of electronic music, especially the kind that's more academic, that really like I enjoy from a technique kind of way, but I'm like, uh, I don't I don't see as much value as you do, especially in a world where we have music tech that is top chart, like pop top 100s. Like that is music tech, you know? It's in 4/4 and it's three chords, but like that is music tech, and it is as technically demanding as some of this crazy live processing stuff. But I did the program just because I was kind of curious, and like how are you going to ignore technology in music when like, or technology in general, when that's just the world we live in. But B, everything that everyone was doing in that program was just like magic. They'd get on stage, they'd be like, woo, and then all of a sudden, like the craziest sounds you've ever heard. And like, I don't know, it was just a way that I felt would lead to being able to expand my musical and emotional vocabulary.
Crazy.
So that's where I would say I acquired a lot of the craft, like the Max MSP stuff,
Mhm.
and learning about What other things? I guess just like multi-channel, like surround mixing, like all of that stuff I got from the program. But I think most importantly was just like an attitude of like you can learn it. Like here's how you look at documentation and learn something on your own.
Oh my
Be
gosh. The
because once
reference.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because once I left, it's like what I have is YouTube videos and like exactly like the references. Um, so
Which for our listeners is like a very dense text of like how to work with these objects in Max, which
oh,
by the
it's
way, also,
undecipherable.
yeah, for our listeners, Max MSP is this visual object oriented coding language, which is, I think, great for creatives because I think we tend to be a little bit more visual in the way we think. So whereas something like C sharp or JavaScript is more text based, this you can actually like physically move objects across the screen, sorry, and like patch them together with chords, which is really fun and aesthetic.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that analog is like really helpful for musicians too, or at least for me, because it's like, I mean, I don't do a lot of analog electronics like Euro rack or any of that stuff to that extent, but it's like I
mhm.
can understand power is coming from here, and I am now moving the power over here.
Right, right. Yeah, and that'll be totally transferable to like the whole Arduino process too. And then yeah, yeah, fingers crossed. I
Yeah.
can't wait to see what you do with that because like once you get some Arduino stuff down, then you can like interface it with Max too, and it'll just be like a really fascinating journey, I'm sure, for the both of us. I
hmm
literally just got my breadboard like yesterday and
I'm so excited for
built my
you.
first LED circuit. I was like geeking out so hard.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, the thing that I did most recently, this LED thing was running directly into Ableton Live. So
Right.
it's I
Yeah.
would like to put it into Max because I realized like I don't know, there's just certain things like certain environments are better for making certain music, but I was basically
Mhm.
making like a lo-fi beat. And so it needed to be in Ableton just so I could kind of automate parameters, thinking about it in like a producer kind of way.
Yeah.
Um,
Let's talk about that. I
okay.
was I was literally like just scrolling on Instagram and then you popped up on my feed with this like magical orb that manipulates sound and it looks so cool. But I'm guessing so that's with Max that you're
That's with
doing.
Max, yeah.
Okay. And is it like a product that comes pre-programmed or like
I I wish I had it next to me, but basically what it is there's another composer who like specializes in electronics and stuff called Mari Kimura, and she makes this like circuit board called Music. That's Mugic. So like I
yeah.
guess shout out plugging Mari Kimura. But I got one of her chips, and basically what it is it's like this little, it's probably about this big. Um, and it has a gyroscope and an accelerometer, and it just sends that raw data of like, the positioning and the speed to your computer through Max. Um, so I had been looking for a long time for like I really like motion controllers because I like the sense of physicality they give that you can like extend a natural musical, a physical gesture, and then like whatever that gesture is should also be like controlling the sound.
It
Um,
really lends itself to the performance aspect of it
mhm.
too, right? Because I feel like with electronic music, it's very easy to like lose that aspect of the experience. Sometimes you go to a show and there's just like some dude standing behind a screen at a table and like pressing buttons. And you're like, what is he doing? And what's like pre-recorded? And you're not too sure. But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, exactly. And like I think as a harpist too, I've always been jealous of like violinists and flautists and stuff, and they can just like dance on stage as much as they want, but I'm stuck
yeah.
in a chair and I've got this. This is what I can do.
Right,
So
right.
it's this music chip, and it's been a process for me of like the first thing I did with it is I like attached it to a bracelet. I made like a little bracelet so I could play and then like do like certain gestures while I was playing, and that would manipulate the sound. But I'll give you a rundown of what the concept of the orb piece is in a little bit because that's
Okay.
like another conversation. But basically, I took that same chip, that's just a gyroscope and accelerometer, and I basically found a way with like glue and rubber bands to stick it inside a $5 like LED tumbler from a novelty store. It's literally
Amazing.
it has a straw that I threw out and it's for drinking wine. And it's for being like a party girl. And yeah, I'm gonna be a party girl. So I just stuck it on the inside. And the performance aspect is really important to me that like I have this thing that sounds magical, but for like the immersion of the experience, it also has to look magical. And so I thought, like let's get a crystal ball, let's get some kind of
Mm,
like cool glowy looking action. Which is like it sounds stupid when you say it like that, but I think simplicity in a technical field is so essential.
mm.
Because I don't know. I get lost myself too, being like, isn't this thing so cool? And they're like, what even is that? Like, like what are these numbers doing? I'm like, okay,
Yeah,
okay, okay. Um,
that's so
I
true.
forget.
With like I know, especially with technology when there's so many options, right?
hmm
Like when you open Ableton Live or when you open Max MSP, there's like thousands of instruments and objects that you can choose from, and like as a result, so many different results you can get from any creative journey with it, right? So yeah, whittling it down and just like making it nice and simple really has a magical element to it, I think.
Yeah, I think one of the best pieces of composition advice I've ever gotten is like that you have to know what a piece is about, but equally you have to know what it's not about.
Yeah.
And that really changed the way I thought about making music.
Hmm. Interesting. Speaking of what things are about, I wanted to talk about this piece you wrote called Move Fast and Break Things,
Oh yeah.
because I love the premise. So could you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. So that was a class project at one point in time.
Cool.
And everyone had to write a piece for a solo instrument and electronics.
Mm,
Um, and I chose to do what's called triggered fixed media. So I pre-made chunks of sound, like instrumental chunks, and I was using a Bluetooth pedal
mm,
to make the chunk happen. And so the mechanics of the piece were that I would play harp, and then when I wanted the backing track to happen, I would hit something with my foot, and that would happen. So like as far as things go, that's a pretty like safe setup and nothing too crazy, like nothing was being processed live. Um,
mm.
but what the piece was about, I mean, I'm always on my bent of moving fast and breaking things and trying to do unconventional things. But I don't know. It was just one of those like I have a streak of like being enamored with breaking instruments, which is like nobody wants to hear that, like especially not harpists.
Oh yeah,
Um, so
we're very protective, aren't we?
it grew out of like this way older like music video piece where like the final movement was just like smashing a violin.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
I got a $30 violin from Amazon and like
Wait, I just ordered a broken violin and I'm gonna be like growing mushrooms out of it. So I'm right there with
that's
you.
so sick. Oh my gosh, that's so sick. But yeah, I wanted to continue. I was like, sometimes I don't know. I don't know if you feel this when you write music, but sometimes you have an idea that shows up in a piece and you're like, "Ooh, I really want to explore that more." And I didn't like the right time and place was not in that piece, but maybe in another one. So it was
Right,
one of
right.
those moments. And I was like, what if this whole piece of music was just the sound of like a harp just completely breaking? Like you push it down the stairs and it just,
Yeah,
crumbled.
yeah.
Like what would that sound like?
Right.
And so I made this very kind of, a lot of the words that people usually use to describe classical music don't really apply. Like I wouldn't call it dissonant, though it is, and I wouldn't call it,
Mm,
like necessarily like attach any form of emotion to it. But it was just like a lot of samples of like guitar strings snapping or of like wood crunching or of like metal collisions, and things
yeah.
that generally just sound like like aggressive falling apart.
Right.
Um,
They would be
and I
terrifying if they were coming from your harp.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And so I
Yeah.
wanted to intersperse that as naturally as possible with harp gestures. So you get some kind of like actions like a thundergliss where you like pull all the strings and make them rattle each other, like hit each
Yeah.
other, that are kind of they're fine for the instrument for the record, but like they are on the aggressive end of things you can do with a harp. And to take that and like expand what that gesture means by adding on top of it the sound of something actually breaking was something
Mhm.
that I was really interested in. And so, you know, it's only like a 3 minute piece because I don't think you need to spend so much time in that world.
Right.
Um,
I just thought it was
but
a really interesting concept too, though, because it comes from a Mark Zuckerberg quote, right?
oh
Like,
yeah, 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 right.
yeah,
The whole
like
thing
that
about
was
the
like his
title.
motto for Meta, right? For like
Yeah. So
innovation, right?
yeah, a really, really interesting thing about that is like, so that is Mark Zuckerberg's like idiom or whatever. He says, move fast and break things to be like you should be innovating, you should be moving fast, and you should not do the ordinary. And like that is all cool with me. You know, I'm not the biggest meta fan for
Yeah,
like, you
you and me
know, for
both.
like huge corporation reasons. And so that piece was like in the program notes, it says it's actually inspired by um a comic. I don't know if you're familiar with
Yeah,
XKCD by
Randall
Randall
Monroe.
Monroe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's so good. I like grew up reading his comics because my dad is an engineer, and so we're
Okay, yeah,
into
same.
big
Yeah.
nerd humor, you know?
Exactly. So like the nerd humor. So there was one comic that was like Um, basically the joke of the comic was like, I've been following the advice, move fast and break things. Here's a list of jobs that I've been fired from. And on the end of that list was violinist. And I thought
Yeah.
about it and I was like, okay, we can like I can do something with that musically. So like
Totally.
more so than the Facebook stuff, I was like really just inspired by this silly web comic to like be like, let's dive a little deeper. And that's the thing too with all this music is like, at least for me, none of it it's both so deep and so philosophical, but nothing's really that deep. Is it cool?
Yeah,
Does it
yeah.
sound good?
Okay, yeah, this is another thing that I love about your music is that there's mischief imbued in a lot of it. And like I don't think you see that very often. Like, yes, we do
Mm.
see humor throughout music, like throughout history, but like this mischievous sort of like almost like impish tendency to like, I don't know, just like disrupt stuff is kind of
Yeah,
fantastic, you know?
I will take that, you know, because I don't know. I think music school is such a serious place, and music, classical music, anything that's like we are the guardians of history is so serious.
Right.
And I am just that's not who I am. I'm I'm not all that, you know? So
Mhm.
it's I mean, part of it is a discussion of like making authentic art, blah 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 blah, but another part is just like, hey guys, like what if we had fun? And
Yeah,
like what
yeah.
if we just did what we want?
Right, right. I mean, like in your piece, beat switch niche step,
Oh
that
yeah.
I love that piece. It's for string quartet, right? I believe.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I just want to read the movements, like the movement titles for our audience. So the first movement is really loud or intro, really loud. Then bro step, then hard style, trap metal, hyper pop, and then the outro, really loud. Or is it louder? Really louder?
It is really louder.
Really louder. Which I have like some questions about this. First off, what is bro step?
Oh my God. Okay, so basically, where this came from is I had like a crisis, as artists do constantly. I had a crisis, and that crisis was basically like, why am I not making the music that I listen to? Because I mean, I listen to plenty of classical music, but like it's not my go-to. And so I was thinking about like what are some of the weirdest like named things that I listen to, like subgenres of EDM, like very kind of internet core things. Like hyperpop is sort of like very virtual in the way it conveys its I guess messaging.
So
But
do you like Sophie and like Arca? Are those like
oh yeah, yeah, I
artists
love
that
rest in
influences?
peace, Sophie.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, no, 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 I love them. And like there's so much. interesting stuff there about like the construction of like identity in digital space and like the queerness
Yeah.
and like there's like you can dive so deep. But like about bro step, that's kind of just like the 2014 like Skrillex core
Okay.
like we're gonna go to a rave and listen to like some hard EDM, or like we're gonna go to the gym and just pump some absolute
Right.
like horrorcore techno into the earbuds and weightlift. And like and that the thing about it is like what I'm inspired by is like
Yeah.
specificity with passion, I think. So it's like
Right.
that is so specific and such a thing that's like I can tell that like 10 people are feeling this so deeply, and that is like incredibly beautiful to me.
Yeah.
And so all of the names are things like that. I mean, trap metal is kind of a bigger genre, but it's still like a niche of like, you know, they
Mhm.
mixed like kind of really hard hitting trap and then like metal guitars and like grunge.
Yeah.
Um, and
I
like
just remember starting it and then like hearing like the dirtiest filthy woobs like in a string quartet, and I was just like, what am I experiencing right now? Like
oh my God.
it
Yeah.
was great. 10 out of
And
10.
that too, what you'll hear me say over and over is that I just want to give credit to like everybody around me, because that's how I'm influenced too. But my current roommate, who's an audio engineer, was we just, you know, we talk about music and making stuff because he produces. And one of the things he was like is like, yeah, like orchestra, whatever, they're always missing subs. Like whatever classical music is like, they never have sub frequencies. So I took that, and like the opening gesture of that piece began from that conversation where I was like, okay, well, I was thinking about like one approach to composing you can take is thinking about things parametrically, where it's like you break things down into like the different elements of music. So like the loudness, or long versus short, or like bright versus dark timbrely, or and
Mhm.
so the parameter that I was thinking about was loudness. And like I wanted to know what is the loudest possible sound I can get from a string quartet right off the bat. And what I there are a lot of ways to interpret that question, but the one that I came up with was like, okay, like they're going to be double strings, fully unison, and they're going to be like as loud as possible, really digging in, and backed up by just a giant subwoofer. And that's why the beginning is really loud, and the end is the
Yeah.
same thing, but with a little twist, and that's why it's really louder.
Gotcha.
um, but yeah, all throughout the piece, I was just like, what is a different way to make this the loudest possible music?
A great question. I think one that you eloquently answered.
Well, that's the thing. Like, so it's so much philosophy and so much technical, like mechanical tinkering to get to the end result, which for me is almost never that subtle.
Mhm.
I think there are plenty of amazing artists who deal in shades and have like amazing things that really invite you in and show you like show you what their world is like. But a lot of my stuff just tends to be like punch in the face.
So I did want to talk about um self and glimmerflecked as
Hmm.
well,
Hmm.
but I think because they've already gotten such like a nice reception that we might not have to spend so long on them. And
Hmm.
I do want to talk more about what's going on like presently in your life with like strum.
Hmm.
So maybe just a quick word about self and glimmerflecked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just anything, any thoughts about that?
Yeah, let's start with self, because that was the one you wrote before
Hmm.
Glimmerflecked, right? Okay.
Yes.
And that was the winner of the, this is a mouthful, the 2021 USA IHC Ruth Inglefield, where is it, composition contest, right?
Wow,
Yeah.
yes. It is a mouthful.
Yeah. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. To this
Um,
day, I am shocked about that. Not in an imposter syndrome way, but just in a
yeah.
way where it's like, wow, like nice. I'm happy about that. But genuinely like was not expecting that reception, which is good.
Yeah, yeah. But as a result, it was like put. as like a stage 3 piece, right? In the
Yes. Yeah, so it
composition. So
became
people were
required
required to,
repertoire,
yeah, that's
which has
amazing.
which has really, really helped me as a composer too, because whether they like it or not, all these performers are now connected to me.
Yeah.
And when I go up to them and I'm like, hey, like, do you want to collaborate on something? I know that they already had to slog through my music. So like maybe they'll be open to it, or at least they
Right.
know what they're getting into.
Yeah, yeah. That's
Um,
fascinating.
yeah, but I guess really briefly about that piece is I have like really bad like stage fright. Like I'm a very anxious performer, and that I don't think that's really going away, but it's especially worse in classical contexts. So part of what that piece is, I mean, the overall theme is like I wanted to create a melding of the harpist and the harp, of the performer and their instrument, so that everything felt seamless, like it was one body, and that's what self meant, is that like it's two halves, one self.
And that
Um,
came from a feeling of disconnection, right? Like that inspiration came from, I could be wrong here, but I feel this sometimes when I play classical music where I'm like, okay, I can like play the notes, do the dynamics and like move with it and people will think like, oh wow, this is beautiful. But like I'm missing this connection. And
mhm.
I think that was the problem you were trying to solve when you were writing this, right?
Yeah, I would frame it more as a goal than a problem,
Mm.
because there's a certain flow state that even now I'm trying to learn how to tap into more immediately, where it's like when I get there, there's no separation. There's nothing, like it's me, and like the harp is just part of me, and the music is part of me, and there's no really real need to worry about anything technical or any kind of like I don't know. It's just a certain mindset you reach when you're in kind of like a performance high and you're like, it's just so effortless. And
Yeah,
that is something, especially with stage fright, that is like not easy to access.
totally.
So I built this piece with that in mind. And if anybody knows it, or if you're familiar with the beginning, the first 3 minutes are one single monophonic line. Like it is one of the easiest possible things to play on the harp, at least at a like virtuoso repertoire level. Like, because I knew I'm gonna have to perform this and I want to warm up for 3 minutes on stage before I have to do anything crazy. And so that was like, a little gift to myself, but also whoever's playing it, to facilitate, we're not going to jump in right off the bat with,
Right, right. You get a chance to get in the zone.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. That's nice.
And I
And
will,
then
yeah, that is something I will admit.
that's great. And then this piece, Glimmerflecked. This was it's it's more conceptual, right? It's like you're, well, it's not more conceptual, but you're taking like scenes and almost like painting them in sound,
Yeah, I would
right?
say if I've done anything impressionistic, this would be it.
Yeah.
But it was commissioned by my harp professor at Indiana University. That's Elżbieta Schmidt, who is so wonderful. And she also, like, I talk to her whenever I go through a commissioning process. It's like I really want to know the commissioning party. Like I'm not writing a piece, I'm creating something that exists in a context. And so I talked with her and I was like, okay, like what are you looking for? Do you want this piece to reflect you? And she was looking for something that kind of had like a softer side and a like more like a very serene, almost holy side, and then like a fun, like upbeat dancing kind of side. And so that
Right.
those were like the concepts I had at the start, when I was writing it. And then everything from there was just I think I did a not a major revision, but a pretty big revision this year, actually. It was written in 2021, and I did a 2023 revision just to clean up a couple things. Like when the dust settles, sometimes you're like, okay, there's like we can do some tweaking.
Right,
Um,
right.
and oops. And um, yeah, so the first movement is both of them are connected by the idea of light. Um, and two different contexts in which you might experience light. And the first one is light streaming through stained glass, almost like in a chapel or in like some kind of sacred or serene space. And so there's a lot of gestures that are just like glitter in the air and like very, very quiet, and then like glitter. And the other one is like kind of like party lights almost, or like you can kind of hear in the distance there's like a bonfire, or a bunch of people are dancing, and like as you get closer you can see like the like
Right.
all of the crazy rave lights are going like woo, 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 woo,
Yeah,
woo.
yeah.
And
I
then
loved
there's like
the
a big
idea of
finish.
a harp piece that was like telling the story of a rave. I thought that was really cool.
It's
Like,
just one thing that I'll be so explicit about is like pretty much everything ever that I write is like inseparably attached to what's going on in my life, to the point that it's embarrassing that sometimes I look at the things that I write and I'm like, this is so obviously like an allegory for a very specific and humiliating situation that I just went through. But like, what is the point of art if not like to do that?
yeah, yeah. It's so true.
But yeah,
Well,
anyway, the rave thing is just because I like going to raves.
yeah, you gotta have fun. You got
Yeah, you gotta.
So yeah, let's fast forward a bit and
Hmm.
let's talk about what's going on in the life of Ari today. So I know
Yes.
recently I've been seeing posts on Harp Society and on your personal page about this harp concerto.
Mm,
So could you tell us a
yes.
bit about that? Is
I
any
could tell you
details
so
secretive?
much.
Cool, cool.
It's no, it's not secretive. It's been officially announced and yet
Okay.
not finished, but
Mm,
officially announced. Um, and I feel so lucky to be putting this project together. So it is a harp concerto, and I'm running it sort of as a consortium. So for those that aren't familiar with how consortium commissioning works, it's basically instead of one person saying, I want you to write music for me and I'll premiere it, you get a group. In my case, it's 10 people, 10 harpists, who I asked, would you like me to write you a piece? And they said yes. And so I'm working with all of them to hopefully all of these premieres will be in like April 2024-ish. There's a lot of logistical work left to be done, but that's always how it is.
Which
But
I gotta
that,
say is so ambitious of you, you know, like you just reaching out to 10 different harpists on its own is like a labor of love, you know what I mean? And like
yeah.
and then getting them to perform a concerto of your work.
Yeah. Well, it's all continuity because a lot of these people were from the USA International Harp Competition.
Okay.
So it was easier to contact them because they had to play self. They had to play my
Mhm.
piece that was required. And you know, it was kind of like a if you like that, there's more where that came from
Right, right.
situation. But also, you know, I picked people who I thought had really kind of unique programs of like in the stage where they choose their own program or were like kind of interested in new music, and people that I thought would be generally passionate about this project.
Mhm.
And also that's why I say I'm so lucky because I have just an insane lineup of what I think are literally just like the best harpists like in our generation coming up. And I'm like, thank you so much. You are amazing for like playing this piece. And like, you know, I hope they feel similarly, but I feel very grateful to get feedback even from these incredible performers.
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, basically the goal of that was for me to be like, all right, it's like I've been writing music. Let's take a shot at canonization.
Mm.
And this is like we haven't even talked about the music. This is just the context, but I'm like, I want to put this
Yeah.
out as far as possible. I'll get 10 people, seems like manageable-ish, like around the world. You know, you take a shot and see what happens.
Right.
Um, and
What's
so
the timeline like? You said it's been announced, so are there
yes.
performance dates yet or like
There are a couple. I'm
uh,
aiming for all performances to be April or May 2024. That would be the hope.
that's
Um,
so soon.
it is pretty soon. And so
Yeah.
like actually I'm in crunch time for it right now because I've reached I'll explain kind of the accompaniment setup.
Mhm.
Um, I wanted this to be programmable. I want this to be a piece that you can pick up and like, if you want to play one movement, that's fine. If you want to play all of it, that's fine. I want it to be easy for the harpist to put together. So the
Mhm.
main thing I'm launching is a string quartet version. So it's very heavy harp part, obviously, because it's a concerto, but it's harp and string quartet.
Mhm.
Um, and so I'm finishing up maybe like the last 20 bars of it, literally, like hopefully today or tomorrow.
Wow, cool.
And then after that, I'm orchestrating it for full orchestra, possibly somewhere in between like a sinfonietta or something. And then one of the harpists will be playing with a full orchestra. Maybe if anyone else like can pull an orchestra out of their pocket, they're welcome to. But I want like the classic harp concerto version, but I also it's for people and it's for people to listen to, so it should be easy to program relatively.
Yeah.
So that's what was your question again?
Oh, I guess just tell me about Strum and like the process and everything. Like,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, yeah,
okay,
yeah.
where did the idea come from?
Hmm. That's a good question. And also I've gotten people like being like, "Hey, did you know there's a Jesse Montgomery piece called Strum?" And like, "Yes, I know, but it's a different thing, so leave me alone." Um, the idea was I think this is maybe one of the more technically driven pieces that I've written. There's obviously musical meaning and there are a lot of inspirations that I'll get into. But one of the big things that I wanted from this was to prove that there's much more to the harp. Like there's much more exploration to be done with the acoustic pedal harp. Um, and so throughout it are a lot of kind of ways of using the harp that I think are both very closely tied to the repertoire that a lot of harpists have to learn, but are also like totally unique. I'm hoping, like, or at least are not mainstream at all yet. So there's a thing that I'm calling the like ukulele effect. That's like a strum pattern where you mute certain other strings so that you
Mhm.
get a specific sonority. There's ways of like using enharmonics and like I'm just combining things in ways that I guess now I'll talk about inspiration, but in ways that I think we don't get to see so often as harpists. Um, so each movement of strum, and the reason why it's called strum, is inspired by a different genre of string music.
Okay.
And so the first string music could mean anything, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And pretty much all of these genres, once again, just like beat, switch, niche step, just like everything I ever do, or something that had some impact on my life. So the first movement is power chord, and it's kind of like metal rock. I use like a lot of something that I stole from guitars. I was trying to get like a palm muted sound.
Oh,
So there's like strumming, but it's dampened, but you get the rhythmic effect. So there's no pitch,
yeah.
but you get this like choppy thing. And
Right.
then the second movement is called Tahimik, which was the name of my mom's writing studio. It kind of means like quiet in Tagalog,
Cool.
or Filipino. And so it's based on like traditional Filipino rondalia ensemble, which is it's sort of like a bunch of plucked string instruments, like a lot of lute-ish instruments. And so to mimic that, there's a lot of fluttering textures, a lot of really like enharmonic resonant sounds. And that's kind of like the technical breakdown, I guess. Third movement is what's the name of it? Summer Song. And that's the one with the ukulele. And I was just thinking, like, imagine you were sitting by a tree reading a book and you're strumming your ukulele, and it's very, very like chamber pop, like very light and breezy. And then the last movement, which is the one that I'm currently finishing, is a synthesis of the previous three, but through the lens of Western classical harp. And it's called cadenza finale. In the typical, that's a very Western name for a piece.
Yeah.
Um, which side note, I think I I try to not to tokenize any of these kind of genres, but to at least draw attention to the fact that when we throw a Western frame on things, that is as aesthetically commodified as the rest of it, because typically you don't
Mm.
you don't think of it as of like classical music as an aesthetic necessarily, if that's what you're steeped in all the time, but to say like, hey, like this is as much just like a separate thing that is like, I don't know, it's not weaponized tokenization because that's really dangerous, but like I don't know if I'm getting across the point that's like all of these things are inspirations and the Western music is on the same playing field
Right.
in terms of input. But anyway, that last movement features a lot of like really like romantic, like French romantic kind of gestures. But then it ties in all these techniques from the previous three. Um, and like, fingers crossed is done soon. Um, so
Fabulous. Yeah.
that's like a pretty thorough breakdown, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. You've answered all my questions. I just want to say congratulations. It's like such a labor of love to do all this, and you're really cultivating a community by doing this as well, which I think is so important.
I really hope so because what's the point otherwise? Like
Right.
what's the point if we're not doing it together?
Yeah. Yeah. It's fabulous. So I sort of want to wrap up here.
Mhm.
So I just want to know what you're looking forward to, and I guess what your maybe some projects you're working on now and that aren't
Yeah.
and yeah.
I'll circle back to the glowing orb thing because I never talked
Right,
about
right.
what the meaning behind it is. And I know you're gonna get like an hour of me just explaining like like the thoughts behind these things, and maybe someone will find it interesting. But I want to bring it up because it's very related to this community idea that we're talking
Okay.
about now, because
Yeah.
the current like kind of passion projects I'm working on that aren't just like gigs or like show up and play, Christmas Carol are like almost installation style works, where I want to break that boundary between the artist and the audience, between the performer and the stage, and like get people involved in having agency over their experience. Because I think one of the most powerful ways to learn something is by doing it and finding out. And so
Yeah.
I want my music to be something that you can do and not just something that you see.
Right.
Um, so the orb, what I'm planning on, the like official title of that installation is Neuron Mirror Neuron. And it's really inspired by like, I mean, mirror neurons, just in the sense of like the kind of cells in your brain that tell you to mimic other people physically. That
Right.
there's like when people are connected, or
Yeah.
like when you talk to someone one on one and they like scratch your head and then you scratch your head, and like
Mm.
there is like a chemical, there's like a biological reason for that. Um, but it's really kind of a metaphor for just intimacy in general and like connection and one-on-one discovery, I guess. So the idea is that someone is improvising, probably me on harp, and the other people from the audience will come up one at a time, handle the orb, and the way the sound works is it takes both parties to generate sound, and to kind of build up a piece of music together, to build up a language, to understand like the thing about the orb is it's a completely foreign object. And I think
Mm.
the experience of discovery and the experience of connecting with another person is something that I wanted to amplify through this music and through this technology. So that's one aspect of like interactivity and community, and like one way that I'm trying to do it is this neuron mirror neuron thing. And the other one that's like a little bit more ambitious is the Arduino project. Um,
Right.
is a larger scale of that, which right now is tentatively titled Same Sun. That might change, but we'll see. And it's
What's the idea behind that title?
um, so what I'm hoping to work, if I can get my electronics calibrated, is I want a performance like in a dark room, and people from the audience control the ambient brightness by turning their phone flashlights on or off. And so what it boils down to is a metaphor for collective action. So on the dark, when the room is dark, you have one soundscape, and when the room is bright, you have another soundscape. And the only way to fully transition from one to the other takes the cooperation of everyone in the room. And
Wow.
so, yeah. And so
Very cool.
that's what I'm going toward. And that's kind of the thing that I'm building up the technology for. But it's stuff like that where I want experiences that you contribute to that have a meaningful kind of parallel in the real world where it's like, you turn on your flashlight, it doesn't do anything because the room is one flashlight brighter, but we all do it, and suddenly you experience something completely different. Um, and so that's the hope, right? Is that we can get
Yeah.
that to work. So I'm excited to do a lot of testing for that because I think it will take a bit of finesse.
Right. Is this your first stab at installation work or
Yeah, yeah, I would say so.
I saw some videos from the conference where you had some people playing with Wii
Oh, the
remotes.
Wii remotes. Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. The
but
orb is
I guess
kind
this
of
was sort of born out of that, right?
exactly. The orb
Yeah.
is a very similar processing technique too. And so it's all just kind of building on itself slowly, but like
Yeah.
I, as a performer, have really been leaning lately into improvisation and like
Mhm.
kind of doing things where I, like, in some senses, having to play written music is like a mental block from just letting whatever I want kind of flow out. And that sounds like hippy dippy, but like,
No, it makes
um,
sense.
but I'm that kind of lends itself to installation work because I can sit there and noodle for 3 hours, 4 hours, whatever.
Right.
And so a lot of the stuff, I mean, I could build like a general, like just like this is a panel and you have installation, but like to make my performances installations and to make the pieces I write for myself like cooperative music is kind of the direction I'm leaning in now. And it's all very new and it's not very like formalized. Like I don't have venues or anything. It's just stuff I say friends like come over, let's see if we can make this thing,
Yeah.
do what it's supposed to do.
Well, it's all fabulous, and I love whenever you pop up on my feed and I see some new crazy idea that's just like fabulous. It's all really great.
Oh, thank
I
you.
want to thank you for joining me today and answering all my questions. And
No, thank you for having me.
yeah, this has been great. You can listen to Ari's music at his website, arielsol.com, or follow him on Instagram at Ari_harp. Feel free to follow along at chord47 on Instagram or join us on Discord. Go to patreon.com/chord47 and you can find the link there.